America owes $34 trillion. That number is so massive your brain can't even process it. But here's what nobody's telling you. This isn't a debt problem anymore. This is a math problem, and the math says there's no way out. Every single second, America adds another $100,000 to this debt. Every day, $8 billion. Every year, $3 trillion. Think about that. The richest country in human history is bleeding money faster than it can print it. But that's not even the scary part. The scary part is what happens when the machine breaks. And it will break. Because this isn't about economics anymore. This is about physics. You can't keep accelerating forever. Eventually, something snaps. Right now, I'm going to show you exactly how this system works, why it's designed to fail, and what happens when $34 trillion of debt becomes someone else's problem, yours. Let's start with a number most people don't know. America's total debt isn't just government debt. When you add corporate debt, household debt, and financial sector debt, the real number is over $100 trillion. That's more than 4 times the entire U.S. economy. It's more than the GDP of every country on Earth combined. But let's focus on the $34 trillion because that's the one the government admits to. Here's how we got here. In 1980, U.S. national debt was under $1 trillion. 44 years later, it's 34 times bigger. GDP didn't grow 34 times. Wages didn't grow 34 times. Productivity didn't grow 34 times. Only one thing grew that fast: the willingness to borrow. Why? Because the system runs on a simple incentive. Borrow now, let someone else pay later. Politicians get elected by spending money. They lose elections by raising taxes. So they spend without taxing. The difference becomes debt. Every president since Reagan has added trillions. Bush added $6 trillion. Obama added $8 trillion. Trump added $8 trillion. Biden's on track for $7 trillion. It doesn't matter who's in charge. The debt grows. Now here's where it gets dangerous. Debt isn't free. You have to pay interest. Right now, the U.S. government pays over $1 trillion a year just in interest payments. That's more than the entire defense budget. More than Medicare. More than anything except Social Security. And that interest rate, it's rising. For decades, the Federal Reserve kept interest rates near zero. Borrowing was cheap. The government could roll over debt without pain. But in 2022, inflation spiked. The Fed had no choice but to raise rates. Now the interest on U.S. debt is compounding faster than the economy is growing. Here's the math. If interest rates stay at 5% and the debt stays at $34 trillion, the government will pay $1.7 trillion in interest every year. That's almost half of all tax revenue, just to service the debt. Not to pay it down, just to keep it alive. But it gets worse, because the government isn't stopping at $34 trillion. Every year, it borrows $2 to $3 trillion more. Social Security is running a deficit. Medicare is running a deficit. The defense budget keeps growing. Infrastructure is crumbling, and nobody wants to cut spending or raise taxes. So the debt grows, and the interest grows, and the share of the budget consumed by interest grows. This is called a debt spiral. And once you're in it, there are only 3 ways out. 1, you grow your economy faster than your debt. But US GDP growth averages 2% a year. Debt growth is 8%. The gap is widening. 2, you cut spending or raise taxes. But that's political suicide. No politician will do it until they have no choice. 3, you print money, and that's where the story turns into a nightmare. Let's talk about what happens when a government prints money to pay its debts. History has seen this before. Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina. It always ends the same way. Hyperinflation. Here's how it works. When the government can't borrow anymore because investors don't trust it, it tells the central bank to print money. The central bank creates dollars out of thin air and buys government bonds. The government gets cash, the debt gets paid. Problem solved, right? Wrong. Because now there are more dollars chasing the same amount of goods. Prices rise. People need more dollars to buy the same things. Wages don't keep up. Savings get wiped out. The middle class disappears. If you're enjoying this breakdown, hit like. It tells the algorithm this is worth showing to more people. Now, some people say the US is different. The dollar is the world reserve currency. Everyone needs dollars. We can print as much as we want. That used to be true. But the world is changing. China and Russia are trading oil in yuan and rubles. Saudi Arabia is considering yuan for oil sales. The BRICS nations are building an alternative payment system. Central banks around the world are buying gold at record levels and reducing their dollar reserves. Why? Because they see what's coming. The US has weaponized the dollar, sanctions, freezing assets, kicking countries out of SWIFT. Every time the US does this, other countries realize the dollar isn't neutral anymore. It's a weapon. And if it's a weapon, we need to protect ourselves. So they diversify, they buy gold, they create alternatives, and every time someone stops using dollars, the demand for dollars drops. And when demand drops, the value drops. This is the hidden danger. Right now, the US prints trillions of dollars, and the world absorbs them because they need dollars for trade. But if the world stops needing dollars. All those printed dollars come flooding back into the US economy. That's when inflation goes from 3% to 30%. That's when a gallon of milk costs $15. That's when rent doubles in a year. And here's the part people miss. Once that process starts, it accelerates. Because when people see prices rising, they spend their money immediately. They don't save. Why would you? Cash loses value every day. So people buy anything real: food, cars, gold, property. Demand surges. Supply can't keep up. Prices spike even more. The government prints more to cover rising costs. Prices rise faster. It's a feedback loop. And once it starts, it's almost impossible to stop without severe pain. Now let's look at who gets hurt. If you're rich, you own assets: stocks, real estate, businesses. When inflation hits, asset prices rise. Your wealth is protected. You might even get richer. If you're poor, you don't own assets. You live paycheck to paycheck. When prices double, your life becomes impossible. You can't afford food, you can't afford rent, you fall through the cracks. The middle class, you're the biggest loser. Your savings in the bank become worthless. Your salary doesn't keep up. Your retirement fund evaporates. Everything you worked for vanishes. This isn't theory. This is what happened in every debt crisis in history. But here's the twist. The US government knows this. The Federal Reserve knows this. Wall Street knows this. And they're not trying to fix it. They're trying to delay it. Why? Because the people in power today won't be in power when the crisis hits. They'll be retired. They'll have moved their money into safe assets. They'll be fine. The bill will land on you. Right now, the strategy is simple. Keep the system alive as long as possible. Print money when you have to. Raise rates when inflation spikes. Cut rates when the economy slows. Repeat. It's called kicking the can down the road, and it works until it doesn't. Here's what the breaking point looks like. One day, the US Treasury will auction bonds, and there won't be enough buyers. Interest rates will spike. The government will have two choices: default on the debt or print money to cover it. If they default, every pension fund, every bank, every country holding US bonds takes a massive loss. The financial system collapses, credit freezes, businesses can't borrow, people can't get loans, the economy shuts down. If they print, inflation explodes. Your money becomes worthless, savings vanish, society destabilizes. Both options are catastrophic, and nobody knows which one the government will choose until it happens. Comment below. Do you think the US will default or print its way out? I read every comment. Now let's talk about timing. When does this happen? Nobody knows exactly. It could be 5 years, it could be 20, but the math says it's inevitable. Here's why. Debt compounds. Right now, interest payments are manageable, but every year the debt grows. Every year the interest grows. At some point, interest payments become so large that the government has to borrow just to pay the interest. That's the moment of no return. Economists call it the debt trap. Once you're in it, you can't get out without a crisis. The Congressional Budget Office projects that by 2050, interest payments will consume 100% of tax revenue. That means every dollar the government collects will go to interest. Nothing left for Social Security, nothing for defense, nothing for schools or roads or anything. That's not sustainable. Something will break long before 2050. Some analysts think the breaking point is when debt hits 200% of GDP. The US is currently at 120%. At the current rate, we'll hit 200% in 15 to 20 years. Others think the trigger is when foreign buyers stop buying US bonds. China's already selling. Japan's slowing down. If the trend continues, the US will have to rely entirely on domestic buyers and the Federal Reserve. That's when the printing press goes into overdrive. Here's what you need to understand. This isn't a partisan issue. This isn't left versus right. Both parties are responsible. Both parties keep spending. Both parties refuse to make hard choices because the hard choice is pain. Now to avoid catastrophe later. And no politician gets elected by promising pain. So the system continues. The debt grows, the risk builds, and one day it breaks. Now here's the part that should terrify you. When this breaks, it won't just hurt Americans. The US dollar is the foundation of the global financial system. If the dollar collapses, every currency tied to it collapses. Every economy that trades in dollars collapses. We're talking about a global depression, not a recession. A depression. Trade stops, supply chains break, food shortages, energy crises, social unrest. This isn't fear-mongering. This is what happens when the world reserve currency fails. It's happened before with the British pound. It will happen again. The question isn't if. The question is when, and what you do before it happens. So what can you do? First, understand that cash isn't safe. If inflation spikes, cash loses value. Don't keep all your wealth in a bank account. Second, own real assets. Things that hold value when currency fails. Real estate, commodities, precious metals, productive land. Third, reduce debt. If you're in debt when inflation hits, your debt becomes easier to pay off. But if you're relying on savings, you're destroyed. Fourth, build skills. In a crisis, the most valuable thing you own is your ability to create value. Learn skills that will always be needed. And fifth, pay attention. Most people won't see this coming because they're not looking. You're watching this video, so you're already ahead. The system is designed to keep you distracted, keep you working, keep you borrowing, keep you dependent. But the math doesn't lie. 34 trillion in debt, 1 trillion in interest, rising rates, slowing growth, falling demand for dollars. The equation doesn't balance. And when an equation doesn't balance, reality corrects it. Violently. Here's the final thing you need to know. This isn't about predicting the future. This is about understanding the machine. Once you see how it works, you can't unsee it. The debt will keep growing until it can't. The government will keep borrowing until no one will lend. The Fed will keep printing until the currency breaks. It's not a conspiracy. It's not a secret plan. It's just incentives. Everyone in the system is doing what makes sense for them right now. But all those individual decisions add up to a collective disaster. And the people who will pay the price aren't the ones making the decisions. It's you, your savings, your job, your future. That's why this matters. If you found this valuable, subscribe. Because next week, we're breaking down exactly what happens in the first 90 days of a debt crisis. The bank runs, the currency controls, the government actions, and what you can do in those 90 days to protect yourself. This is just the beginning. The real damage is still ahead.